Thank you very much, Dr. Reed Geisler, soon to be anesthesiology resident at Yale, for your interview as the host slash moderator of the Discord uh, channel for applicants. Dave, what do you think were the big points you took home from that interview?
I think first, it's very clear that applicants are engaging in the types of platforms like Discord, looking for information about the programs, looking for a leg up in the application cycle, looking for camaraderie, whatever it might be. But applicants are engaging on these platforms, and so I think us as program directors need to know about them. The second point that I took home was a little bit more nuanced, which is just that I think applicants want, we talk a lot about holistic review as program directors. I think that's probably the buzzword of the last couple of seasons. And applicants, I think, want that. I think they want to be seen as people, and they want the transparency to know that we are seeing them as people. And so I think there's an onus on us as program directors to be able to be clear about how are we evaluating their applications, what are we looking for, and to reassure them that we do see them as people and not just like a statistical algorithm in our big databases. And then the last thing I think is that the candidates really want to know about that process. They want to know how we are approaching this, and I think otherwise they're left in the Discord echo chamber where it's like somebody says this is the truth, nobody else has any evidence to refute them, and those ideas just bounce back and forth. And one question I had for you is, Reed brought up that he would like more information. Like he thinks programs should put things out there like their ACGME survey or like specific case logs. Like applicants want to know data about the programs, and that we should try to be as transparent as possible. Like, what do you think about that?
Well, if you look at the very bottom of our ACGME survey, when we get the results, it said this is not to be shared outside of the training program. So I think the ACGME certainly disagrees with that. That being said, I think it can be useful information. However, anything that looks transparent can be gamed to some extent. So I'm afraid that we can wow applicants with certain things that we do, and they become bright, shiny objects that makes the applicants think that they're getting the real dirt. At the same time, what's really happening is they're just getting doctored information, information that we make look transparent. Now, one thing that I believe he said he wanted transparency in that we can do is transparency about how we're doing our selection process. I think that trying to tell applicants what the values of your program are, I know in our program, we're looking for very super specific, but fairly specific values that I think make up for the kind of department we want to build, and being very upfront of the kind of person that you want to see at that program. I'll give you a really boring example. Hey, we don't want people who really just want to be let out of work by 3 p.m. every day. I mean, if that's what you're looking for, that's really something we're not looking for. And then I might caveat that with why I think that's an important value. Put it out there. The last thing you want is an applicant to show up at your program whose values don't align with yours. So I think transparency in that regard is really important. Whereas some of us might feel like we want to cast the widest possible net and not have people self-select out. I think self-selecting out isn't the worst thing in the world when you're doing this process.
Yeah, and I think signals might help us in that self-selecting, right? Because it asks candidates to really place values on what programs they're looking for. But to your point, I think transparency in our selection process super important. I think transparency or more information doesn't necessarily give candidates the answer that they want. I think I've changed my mind on this over time. When I was a candidate, like I had a spreadsheet, like there was data analysis happening. And my wife, who I was couples matching with at the time, she would walk out of a program and she would write like a haiku, like 3 lines on a sticky note, and that would be all the notes she would take about a program. And at the time, that used to drive me crazy. Now, I think the narrative stories, the culture, the values, the things that you maybe could capture in a haiku, like those are the things that I think tell you a lot more about the program than, do they do 40 or 45 cardiac cases on average? Or do they get out on average at 4:45 or 5:15? Or do they get 3 or 3.5 weeks of vacation? Like, I think those data points I don't think are as important as they feel when you're going through the process. What do you think?
I think your wife sounds like she's way cooler than you are. I mean, what a great strategy. I really have to agree. I mean, I might call it the internet datafication of the interview process. internet dating, get way too much information. When I even tell the applicants on interview day, I'm going to give you a lot of info, but I want you to walk away from here with a gut feeling, and I want you to trust your gut. I'm gonna even talk about my personal romantic history and how successful it's been by using my gut. Uh, but I think your wife's onto something. And that I think the heart's better than the head, and you're right. So maybe just transparency in what we're looking for. Again, I think dating is the best analogy for this whole process. You know, we wanted to talk to Reed to start to delve into what we are calling the interview dark web, a little play on the intellectual dark web that exists on the internet. And I talked to my coordinator, and I wanted to bring up some topics that came up and give people the PD point of view on some of the topics. And some of the things we saw that came up again and again and again was the importance of perceived prestige playing the main role in people's selection process. Should this drive their decision making? What's your point of view? I mean, you went to Massachusetts General Hospital, so that's a very prestigious institution. What do you think?
Prestige is it's one of those things that is so hard to quantify. And if you go around the country and ask people to name the most prestigious anesthesiology residency programs, there's some names that are going to come up again and again. And then there's a lot of variety in that. I, I think that prestige is important in that there's a network attached to prestige. So I'll give it that value. But other than that, I think chasing prestige and ignoring the values of the program, the values of the things that you as a candidate think are important or that you envision for your career are really going to lead you to miss out on perhaps a better match for a place that you want to be at and are going to be excited to be at. What do you think?
I'll make the caveat, I'll notice in some fellowship matches that fellowship program directors tend to want to have a match list that carries a lot of the big names. Cardiac in the Northeast, I get the sense that those fellowships want their fellows to come from the big name programs. So I just have to concede that point. There are some very small private groups, I don't even know if they exist anymore, that seem to want. I heard of one that only wanted chief residents from Harvard. I don't know if you ever heard about that group in Connecticut. I don't know if it still exists. So accepting for those small factors, I would have to say that I think people think that having that name on their CV is going to carry them. In the grant process of things, that's not how I see getting jobs or matching into fellowships work. I think it has a lot more to with who you know. Maybe who you know at those prestigious programs helps a lot. But for
Sure.
example, my chair ran the ASA, has run the PGA, is one of the biggest names in anesthesiology. That really goes a long way in getting people the opportunities they're looking for. So I have to concede the small instances where prestige really seems to play a role. Uh, but I think people are doing themselves a disservice by primarily paying attention to that and putting on blinders as they go through the process and maybe missing out on that program that gives them the warm fuzzies and turns out the best haiku at the end of the day. Another thing that came up was criticisms, or slander is a good word, of things they find out about programs without the appropriate context of having been through residency, knowing how the system works. So I'm going to give a word, Dave, and I want you to riff on it. Workhorse. What does that mean to you? When
Oh,
you hear that, what do you think?
cringe, immediate cringe when I hear, oh, this is a workhorse program because there's just no, it is just like trying to grade an applicant only by their USMLE score. Like that's the equivalent in my mind. If you are labeling a program a workhorse, you are trying to quantify a residency program's training based on their USMLE score, and it just doesn't work. And workhorse is, if you expect to get out at 3 p.m. and you get out at 5 p.m., then that program's going to appear workhorse to you. If you are ready to work till 7 p.m. and you get out at 5 p.m., you're going to think you are on a country club program. And there's no way to normalize that. And so I think in the interview dark web, that term gets thrown around without the context that helps candidates really understand about a program.
Absolutely. Yeah, I get the sense that many applicants are going into the process with a sense of fear and dread. I'm going to go to a program, and unbeknownst to me, they're just going to abuse me. They're there just to use me. I would say that that is just absolutely the wrong approach to take. I say to my applicants, enter this with a sense of opportunity and not with a sense of dread and self-protection. I think there are far, far, far fewer programs out there that can really be appropriately labeled workhorse with like the demon, the image they have in their mind. That one also makes me cringe a little bit. I can understand the trepidation, but I think it's thrown around a little bit too liberally. How about CRNA relief? Do you relieve CRNAs or do they relieve you? When I hear this question asked, it seems like it just lacks so much context. So what do you say to them? Because I'm sure you've been asked that question.
For sure. Yeah. I think it's I never know what they mean by that question, but I think what they're implying is, are your residents being used as a primary workforce, or are they being used, as a balanced kind of education and learning? And so I try to frame, hey, let's talk about that context, because answering the question of do you ever relieve a CRNA, like you said, it doesn't give you the context of what you're asking. So I think a better question to ask is kind of, what is your approach to the balance between surface and education in your program? And that's something that program directors will know about. They'll be willing to talk to you openly about, and I think you'll get a better answer to what you're seeking.
I think so. I take a different tack. I just flood them with what I think is the relevant information about CRNAs are shift workers. Here are the different shifts that they work. Some work till 3 p.m., some work till 5, some work till 7. I talk about the number of days they can cover, how we utilize that to cover cases to support the residency training program. In that context, if you are an on-call resident, you certainly could relieve a CRNA who's leaving because you'll be there all night. If you are out early, a late CRNA could relieve you. So I guess my answer to your question is yes, and sometimes maybe, I guess, but they are there for the support of the residency training program. I think it's just a really bad question, but they don't have the context. Also, a lot of people on the interview dark web talk about, oh, this program or this hospital, other people will transport your patients, they'll place IVs for you, or, oh, at this city program, you have to do everything yourself. What would you tell someone? Let's say that your cousin is applying to anesthesiology residency and comes to you and says, "Oh, I love the sound of this program. All my IVs are placed for me. All the patient transport is done for me. That sounds amazing." What would you say to that person?
You know, the ACGME really focuses on this idea of non-physician tasks, and I think that has ballooned to accompany many things that I think are physician tasks. So, for example, if you're an anesthesiologist, I think placing your patient's IV is a very reasonable physician task. I think that going to clean the stretchers in the basement is not an appropriate physician task. But I also don't think there are programs really left where that's the resident's primary job. So again, I think it's one of those questions that doesn't really reflect the reality right now. I think if you're trying to get at, like, are you doing things that are not your job, then I think, first of all, don't ask the program director, ask the residents, like, hey, what are things that bug you about your job? Or what are things that you wish you didn't have to do in your job? And then maybe you'll get some of that information. But I think don't align, like, not pushing the bed or not placing the IV with, gosh, I'm going to focus all my energy on the best parts of the case, because doing those things helps you get to the best parts of the case, I think.
Well, today I actually tied up the surgeon's gown and he did the little spin, and I do that commonly. I will tie the
Yeah.
gowns for the medical students that come in the operating room. Those are certainly not my task, but I would say that's a positive prognostic indicator for the kind of friendly, collaborative environment we have in our hospital. Um,
Right.
so I get a little bit concerned when I see that on the interview dark web. I don't get asked that too much in interviews, but sometimes I wish I could dox people. Like, who's asking that? Like, I want to know, is that someone I'm interviewing? We don't dox anybody around here. One thing that I read where I feel bad is sometimes people ask if there's any interview slots available at certain programs. They're on Thalamus, they see how many slots are open. Now, I know personally from the way that I schedule interviews and open up slots that if you check at any point in time, there could be 0 interview slots open, and voila, in 2 weeks, there are 30 new interview slots open. Um, so I don't think that's the best place to get the information. Does that impact, do you schedule in a manner such that what they see isn't indicative of what exists, or do you think they're getting accurate information?
No, I think it's another example of kind of that echo chamber that, like, oh yeah, there's, like, Sinai West has no more spots. If you didn't get an interview yet, you're totally screwed. And I think, like, but but they don't know. No, we do the same thing. In most programs, I think, open interview spots as the season goes, because otherwise, inevitably, out of fear or whatever, candidates will pick the last possible dates. And then you'll have all these dates that are coming up that you haven't filled spots for. So you kind of have to open some spots, have those dates filled, and open some more spots. Because again, we only get your applications on this year, I think September 27th. And most of us are going to start interviewing as soon as late October. So there's no possible way that we can read every single application, decide our entire interview. Well, there are a few programs, most cannot decide their entire interview cadre in that period of time. And so we have to kind of roll through them over time. So yes, please, I think one take home that you and I share is, please don't overread into some of the information you find on the internet. You can't believe everything that's written there.
Absolutely. When you're taking care of patients, you're also going to agree with us. Your patients will be reading things on the internet you wish they did not believe. So case exposure. Do you think case exposure drives the quality of training? Because a lot of applicants talk about what they're seeing, the case exposure that they're having advertised in interview day, thinking, oh, my case exposure is the primary indicator or primary predictor of how competent I will be when I leave residency. True?
Gosh,
Not
that's such a great question. Like, I think it is a necessary but not sufficient. Like, you need to be exposed to a lot of cases, but it is definitely not indicative of the quality of the program. There's a lot of variation around that. Often what I tell candidates is, like, if you look at all the good anesthesia programs, they all pretty much have access to all the different types of cases. And then some programs might say, well, we have everything except for we don't do lung transplants. Does that impact your training? Like, I would say absolutely not, or almost absolutely not. And then if you start to go down, there may be some programs that are missing a few things, but even then, I think the impact on your training is probably pretty minimal. So, like, yeah, the program director at Ohio State, we have every type of anesthetic in case, so you should come here. Do I use that line? Yeah. Do I think that tells you everything you need to know? No.
You just sold yourself out, man. Yeah, I actually say to them, listen, the ACGME has to approve this program. So, I mean, they're reviewing our case logs, they're reviewing our case exposure. ACGME is saying it's good enough. And I think the ACGME is doing a good job of auditing these programs. I try to direct them towards the style of teaching. And I think that's something that's very under discounted. What is the style of training? I try to tell applicants there's a spectrum. On one end of the spectrum, you have the more micromanagey programs. And people who train at a program learn how to train from their training at the program. So a certain approach to teaching and culture really self-perpetuates. And you will see some programs where you'll be granted more autonomy, more room to spread your wings. And there's a debate about which approach is best, but I actually think, given that the ACGME does some quality control in terms of making sure the exposure is there, applicants should really look a lot more at the style of training. And the best people to talk to are probably the residents. So exposure is important, and all these programs are getting the appropriate exposure. You do see on Discord and other platforms, people complaining about, or maybe thinking it's an opportunity, when places don't have all of the types of cases or all the rotations in-house. Like, maybe they have to go to an outside children's hospital for their peds, like your program, or maybe an altogether different healthcare system for their peds, like my program does. Like, what do you think, as a program director, seeing your applicants talk, or seeing your residents talking to applicants about the advantage of all in-house versus outside rotations?
I think it's totally a trade-off. Like, so I did medical school at UCSF, where you're bouncing around the entire city to all the different hospitals. And if you were asking me at the time, I would have said, yeah, this is great. I get exposure to, 3 different health systems functionally, in the county hospital, the academic hospital, and the VA. And I get a ton of variety of patients out of this. And then I trained in a residency program where everything was pretty much right there. And I would have said, yeah, this is great. I don't have to drive. I don't have to learn a new system. Realistically, I think pick your poison there. I think ask about the experience, but I agree with you. I think way more important is to ask about, how are you learning? And even more beyond how are you just learning in the clinical environment, but like, what is your educational philosophy of the program? Like, do you expect residents to learn stuff on their own? Do you have a structure and they learn stuff on their own within that structure? Or do you spoon feed them things? Or is there some combination thereof? Like, I think reflecting for candidates to reflect how you learn best and then find the program that teaches the way you learn, I think you're way more likely to be happy in that program than just picking based on any of these other metrics.
So I guess we're leaving this with less checklists, take less information from Discord, and take home haikus. I think we got some news from the AACPD today that they're providing guidance that all programs stick with the virtual format. It's easier to get warm fuzzies in person than it is through the virtual format. So, what are your
We all
feelings?
feel the warm fuzzies of you guys listening to us right now, though. Don't worry.
What do you feel about the fact that it looks like we're gonna in perpetuity continue with the virtual format? And how do you think you're gonna try to find a way for applicants to get a better sense of your program while maintaining this interview format?
We are the first year we went virtual. You could ask my program coordinator. I threw a tantrum. Like, I thought we were never going to recruit anyone to Central Ohio without getting them to Columbus and showing them downtown and how cool of a vibrant city it is and those types of things. And as it turns out, we've done as fine or better in the virtual environment. So like and I think a lot of that, if not all of that, relies on my residents showing up at events and talking about their experiences and being open and honest and willing to answer questions. And so we really, like, if they didn't do that, I don't think I could show them the warm and the fuzzies, right? Because like nobody wants to listen to me talk for a long period of time. I think what we're thinking about constantly is how do we do that better, more authentically, less artificially. And the other thing, that I took away from your conversation with Reed about the Discord server is I think one thing that's missing in the virtual process is having candidates meet each other and start to form those relationships as future professionals in the same specialty. I met one of my future co-residents at a different interview. We then became friends. Like, we talk almost every day. He was in my wedding. Things that doesn't happen so much anymore. And so we're also trying to think about, are there ways that we could utilize our interview day to introduce the candidates to each other and try to create that environment of, it's anesthesiology is not that big of a world. And so I think that getting to know your candidates, your co-candidates, I think is a really useful opportunity.
Well, I think that this coming year, we're going to start to have the new system. I think the future system congeal. I think that's going to be an interview two-step. I know that we're going to finish our interviews by the end of the year. Before Christmas, we're usually done. And that's going to open up all of January and February for what I think most programs are going to do, which is an optional second look and social event. So I think that we're going to interview everyone virtually and then move towards some number between 5 and 10 second looks with bigger crowds, followed by social events. That could provide everything that we think we're missing. It will also provide the flexibility for applicants to not pay the money to visit the sites, and then
Right.
to feel secure that in these second looks, we're going to have to submit our rank list to NRMP, certified, and then say, you're going to have a second look and it's not going to have any impact on your ranking. So maybe that's the best of both worlds for everybody. I mean, I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to the opportunity for my residents to hang out and talk to applicants again. Are you planning on doing anything like that?
We are sketching it out right now, like what a second look could look like. And I, like you, am excited about that possibility, particularly if it's done in a way, like you said, where our rank list is done. Like, you can't, this is for you. And I think it would take some of the pressure off, hopefully pressure off candidates to show up or not show up. Like, I certainly won't be keeping score of who's there or not there. Like, I think it would be, and I also think it could be a really fun opportunity. So we'll see how we can make it work.
Well, thank you, Dr. Stahl, for another thrilling episode. I just want to tell everyone out there I have terrible video envy. Dr. Stahl looks like high def with a makeup artist, and I look like I'm sitting in a basement of a gulag in Siberia. But this has been really fun. We'll get to work and get some other episodes out. Like to have a large group of these together before interview season for our colleagues, program directors to watch. Maybe some applicants can get some useful information from them. So thank you, Dr. Stahl, and good night and good luck.
Thank you.